Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight for our, hi Bonnie, for our conversations with what I call the legends, because to me they are. I'm David Ellenstein. I'm the artistic director of North Coast Repertory Theater. And one of my favorite things about having the job that I have is when I get to bring great, talented people together to work together. And when they are three people who are as esteemed and experienced and amazing as the three that we brought together for Heroes, it's something really special. And since this is our 30th anniversary year, which we're calling a year of celebration, I didn't think there was a better way to celebrate than bringing these three guys together. So we did. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bring them out here, and then I have some questions I'm going to ask them and let them talk for a while. And then I'm going to open it up to you. So as you're listening, as things strike you that you want them to talk about or you want to ask them, please store up those questions, and we'll spend a good time with you asking them what you want to hear them talk about, so it's not just the silly things that I've thought of. So without further ado, Jonathan McMurtry, Ray Reinhardt, and Ken Ruta. My dad used to say, my dad was an actor and a director, and he used to say that the great actors were the high priests of the theater. And so I'm kind of feeling funny sitting up here with three high priests. Did you bless everybody? Good, Ray, good. Just to start with, I thought maybe for those of you who don't know, Ken and Ray and Jonathan could just say a little bit about their backgrounds and where they've worked mostly in their lives, and anything else they'd like to just say by way of introduction. So Ken, you want to start?
That's one of my lines from the play. Where do I begin? I mean, I'm always amazed that I ended up here. As a kid, I didn't know. I think the first thing I wanted to do, I wanted to be a priest. Got over that. And then I wanted to, I think I wanted to write. I'd never thought about acting at all, but it was like writing. I won some contest. My favorite cartoon, I remember, on the Chicago Tribune, I won a contest. So I had to go on reading the funnies on a Sunday, and I made such a fool of myself, they kept me on for I don't know how many Sundays. And my mother said, listen, they're not paying you anything. All they're giving you is baseballs and baseball bats. And Mitch, get off that. And it was always crazy things like that happened to me. It was one of my friends in grammar school. He had a very pushy mother, and she got him singing in the children's chorus of the Chicago Opera back in the 40s. And they needed more kids. And I somehow got it. So I spent 2 seasons singing an opera. I had a AGMA card, and out of nowhere, I was not, and it was wonderful because I was still singing boy soprano, and I remember going out for, we went to a concert. One of the rich women behind the program took us out to dinner after a concert with a very famous opera singer, Ezio Pinza. And Pinza said, how old are you boys? And I said, I'm 13. He said, you are crazy. What is your mother's phone number? And he called my mother and told her she was crazy, and I should stop singing right now because I wouldn't have any voice left. She loved it, so she'd save 50 cents a week that I had her card fare. And I don't know, then I wanted to be an English teacher, and I didn't get I only got a part-time scholarship at Northwestern, so I decided I would go to the Art Institute of Chicago, which had a very good theater and drama school, but I was still thinking about teaching. And I started playing parts, and it really, I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't think about acting. at all. And the first line I had in a play, I remember I had one line in a play called Two Blind Mice by Sam and Bella Spiewak. One line. Who do I see about parking my car? Which got a hand every night. One line. And I think maybe that. And I just stayed at it. And it was thanks to my friends who pushed me, who got me jobs. My parents didn't want me to do it. They were against it. And I had no push. I had no charm at all about going around to agents. I just had very bad skin and was pudgy. And it was my friends who got me jobs in the theater.
Well, I'm just going to throw a couple things out.
That's it.
Most of you have probably heard of the famed Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. Ken was the associate artistic director to Tyrone Guthrie when the theater was founded, and was there for how many seasons did you do? Or how many plays did you do at the Guthrie?
About 40 over. They're going to be celebrating their 50th anniversary in 2 years. So I've been back and forth there. But that was another one of those things in drama school, not knowing what I was going to do. And a bunch of friends of mine said, let's go up to Stratford, Ontario. They're starting a Shakespeare festival. And we went up the first year. And that's when I really got the bug. I said, my dream was to be in a show directed by Tyrone Guthrie and wear a costume designed by Tanya Moisevich. That was 1953. In 1963, the Guthrie Theater started. Opening night, there I was playing Hamlet's father's ghost, directed by Tyrone Guthrie, wearing a costume designed by Tanya Moisevich. And, very proud of this, getting the first exit hand at the Guthrie Theater. My dream was fulfilled. That's it.
Ray, tell us a little bit.
Well, I'm going to start. Ken ended with that about being most proud of. And it happened, my daughter was 16 at the time. She just saw me in Long Day's Journey into Night. And after the performance, she got in the passenger seat in the car and very quiet. She had a little tiny little tear in her eye. And she looked straight ahead. And she said, you were great, ... I hope someday I'll be as good at what I do as what you do as you do. That's the greatest compliment that you could get from your own child, right? Yeah. Now about me. No, it's very funny. I mean, listening to other actors, you know, the insecurity of not knowing. I had no idea I was going to be an actor, but I grew up in the Bronx in New York City, and I was very good at dialects. So you heard Jewish, Irish, German, Spanish, Italian, and I had a good ear for it. And I was always clowning around in school. I wasn't thinking of being an actor, and then I got into the Army. I did my first play, Golden Boy, Clifford Odets. And when I got out of the Army, I thought, well, I should try this, you know. And I've been doing it ever since. It's strange. Again, the encouragement of people around you, that means so much. In high school, I had an English teacher, Miss Bradshaw, and we did, all boys high school, we did excerpts from Macbeth, and Silberg read Lady Macbeth, and I read Macbeth. At the end, she said, Silberg, I would say to you, you read very well. Reinhardt, I would say to you, become an actor. And that goes to your head, you know, because at 16, your English teacher thinks you're, you know. So I went to a seminar of two grand dames of the theater, Eva Le Gallienne and Margaret Webster. I had never even seen a play on Broadway. And they painted such a picture of, you know, poverty. and they looked like they had the work light on the stage. It was a Saturday before the matinee, and they both had mink coats on and splashes of lipstick, and they looked very, very sexy to a 16-year-old, you know. But they painted this picture of being stranded in the Midwest, you know, and that's why we had Actors Equity Union, blah, blah, blah. So after them, I thought, no, that's not the life for me. And but then I went in the army. I did my first play, and then I was, that was it. I had to do that.
And Ray, you ended up at ACT
Yeah.
in San Francisco for how long?
Almost 30 years. Yeah.
How many plays did you do there?
Oh, I don't know. 60 odd. I don't know.
A lot of plays.
Yeah, a lot of
and a
plays.
couple on Broadway?
Yeah. Yeah. With John Gielgud and Irene Worth, Tiny Alice. That was a high point in my life, I must say. And going to the Moscow Art Theater. ACT, the company, went over to Moscow. And, to actors, that's like well, not quite the Holy Grail, but the Moscow Art Theater is one of the beacons, one of the hallmarks of acting, modern acting especially. So, yeah.
Jonathan?
What?
I wish Jonathan knew how to do comedy.
I brought my Craig Knoll hat and was going to. Well, I was born in a show business family. My father was a dancer, a hoofer, and he's in all the Busby Berkeley films and the film Night and Day about Cole Porter. He danced with Jane Wyman. And my mother was a stripper in burlesque, and then she became a choreographer. And her last big job was that she choreographed the Dinah Shore show. So I was born in show business, not the theater. And I had aspirations of being an artist. I studied and went to art school, and I finally got a job at the Disney studio. And I thought, wow, this is a really nice job. But I wasn't creating anything. All I was doing was like little kids do with coloring books. They had all the little frames. I was filled in all the colors, and there was the numbers for each Mickey Mouse. Always had this color. And I got so bored because I wasn't creating anything, and so I decided to go over to Los Angeles City College and do scenic design. So I was painting scenery at the college, and then one of the college professors, who was very noted, Jerry Blunt was his name, asked me into his class on Shakespeare. So I studied there for almost 2 years, and at that time, they don't have this now, at that time they had a contest, a national contest, that if you won, you would get a year's teaching at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. Well, I worked on 2 speeches of Shakespeare, and I won the West Coast, and then they flew me to New York, and I won the semifinals, and then I tied with a guy on MASH, which is Larry Linville. Larry Linville and I tied. So we both got a year's scholarship to the Royal Academy. And then they asked me to stay on, and I graduated there. And I couldn't have been there. I was there in the late 50s. I was there when I could see John Gielgud, I could see Laurence Olivier, I could see Michael Redgrave, all those great actors I was able to see. And my whole life changed. That's what changed me. Albert Finney was my roommate. And I remember that he was, all the Welsh actors, so he's Welsh, are great drinkers. And he was understudying Laurence Olivier in Coriolanus. And Olivier, in the afternoon, it wasn't a matinee. Yes, I think it was a matinee. He tore his Achilles tendon. And so Albert Finney had to go on that night, and they called, and I didn't know where the hell he was. And I went to all the bars, and finally he came in about 5 o'clock, something like that, and he was just sloshed out of his mind. I said, "You're going on tonight at the Old Vic, And so he got in the shower, and I slushed coffee down him, and I guess he got through it. I didn't see it. And so that's what made me. The other thing that happened was my family was against it. They had a big meeting, and they called me in at the meeting in Los Angeles, and my dad was dancing somewhere, and my mother was. They weren't there, and they thought that, why do you want to? Or my father, I says, what do you want to do all that artsy fartsy stuff for? And I said, well, on the phone he called me, and my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncles, it's huge, trying to talk me not to go after winning all that. I said, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Well, it changed my whole life. When I got back, my first job was an apprentice. I worked at Stratford, Connecticut, and was a spear carrier with Katharine Hepburn and Morris Karnofsky in The Merchant of Venice. And I they know this story. There was one guy who was playing Lorenzo, which is the real nice, lovely part that I thought I should be playing. And I was an absolute snob. I had an English accent. I was really an awful person. And so there we are, the two of us with our spears. And he has a famous line, and I didn't like him. It was Ida Lupino's nephew. His last name was Lupino, and I can't think of his first name. But he had a famous line, a man that hath not music in his soul is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. And he's with his girlfriend, Jessica. And so he, one night, while we're standing there with spears, he says, a man that hath not music in his soul a man that hath not music in his soul. A man that hath not music in his soul. Well, it's just awful. Well, we peed. Richard Lupino. I can say he's dead now. So, but that was my first job, and there I met Alan Fletcher, who asked me to join a group of actors in the Fred Miller Theater in Milwaukee, and that's no longer exists. That's where I went, and that's where I met Bill Ball and Alan Fletcher, and that's where I met Craig Knoll. It was the first time that Craig had directed away from the theater, and I played. I didn't have any lines. I played Sugar Sop in The Taming of the Shrew. That's just one character. It's called Sugar Sop. And so then Craig invited me to the San Diego Shakespeare Festival. That was 1961, and I've been 50 years associated with the Globe Theater, and I've done over 200 productions there over the years.
Okay, so we've heard about some of them, but maybe if you guys could just take turns talking about some of the most influential people on you and that helped you move on as a theater artist or impressed by you. We've heard a couple of names, but maybe there's some others that you might want to mention. Ken?
The first real play I ever saw, I don't count things that came to grammar school, but I knew where the theaters were downtown Chicago, and I think it was like Easter vacation, and I just wandered around, and I knew, I had read that there was a new play going on in this place, and I just wandered around the theater, and there was nobody at the backstage door. I wandered in. It was a matinee, and I wandered in, and I walked onto the stage, and I stood off stage and was watching this play, and I was sort of disappointed because I'd never really seen a real professional play, only in the movies, and it was always people going, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I was watching, it was very dim on stage. You couldn't see. And those people they're just talking to one another. And then a hand came and said, "What the you doing here? Get out of here." And I was watching, that was the world premiere of The Glass Menagerie with Lorette Taylor playing. And watching this, they were not acting, they were just like talking to one another. I just never forget that, because they weren't doing blah, blah, blah. But, I think I wish I'd seen her from the front. Seeing her from the side was not the same. But I was always in love with British actors. And the one I loved most, I loved Olivier, that was my idol, and his lady, Vivien Leigh. And there were some wonderful days of youth in New York, the early 60s, 1960. I went and auditioned for a play that Vivien Leigh was going to be in. And I went and read. And the director came in, Robert Helpman. And sitting next to him was Jean-Louis Barrault, who couldn't understand much English. But there was, and then Robert Helpman came to the front of the stage and said, "Well, the lady," I didn't know who that was, it was her, "wants to know if you know what vice is." And my response was simply, "Vice?" And then I heard, "He knows." And I found myself in a show with Vivien Leigh. And I never forget the first morning I was late getting a bus, and I had to take a cab to the theater. And I'm getting out of the cab, and they're walking by me was Vivien Leigh, and she said, "Oh, good morning. How are you?" All I could say was, "Thank you very much." And she looked at me blankly, but she taught me about drinking B&Bs, which we had instead of tea. I remember her maid was sick once, and she wore nothing but Dior gowns, and she asked me if I would be humiliated if I had to carry her to her entrances for the weekend. And every time I did it, that was like 3 performances, I got a case of Dewar's Scotch. But she was, naturally I was in love with her badly. And she was very, very good to me. I didn't go out on the tour with the show. I remember she told me, the guy I was understudying, the romantic lead, and I played a servant with 14 lines. She yelled at her co-star, Mary Ure, saying, "Ken has only 14 lines and he should get 7 laughs, and you are them all up with your acting." So we had to rehearse that. But dear Vivien, I didn't tour with it. I remember I got a phone call from her. Amazed, I thought it was someone pulling my leg. She said, "It's Vivien." I said, "Vivien who?" And she said, asked me what I was doing that night. She said, "Would you take me to the theater tonight?" And we went to see the opening night of Philadelphia, Here I Come. I remember on Broadway. And I knew the playwright at that time because he had been at the Guthrie, so that was a big thrill. And I didn't see her again till almost the end. She was doing Chekhov's Ivanov with Gielgud.
Yeah.
And I went to New Haven to see her. Everybody was at Gielgud's dressing room. There was nobody at hers. And I remember I knocked at the door. And there she was. And I was just amazed that she said, "Ken, what are you doing here? Sit down." And then out of the blue, she said, "You are too young to be playing that part." And I said, "Well, what?" She said, "I know what you're playing at the Guthrie this year. You're too young to be playing that part in Doctor's Dilemma." How it just floored me. But she had kept tabs on me. And I always found that the people who pushed me more in New York were the English actors were so generous, pushing you and getting you auditions for things. which I never encountered from American actors. So that's just about Vivian.
Ray, someone who really made a big impression on you, or was
Several people,
influential?
Actually, I was in the army and doing Golden Boy. My first play I did was in the army, Golden Boy, and I was on leave, and I went to see Golden Boy on Broadway. It was a revival with John Garfield and Lee J. Cobb, and I was so impressed with Lee J. Cobb. I went back afterwards, and yeah, like you, nobody stops you. I just went backstage, knocked on the door, he came out. He was also a big man, such a sweaty, hooded on. And I said, I just want to tell you how much I enjoyed your performance. And he said, people like you that make it worthwhile. I thought that was very nice. And also Jose Ferrer in Cyrano in high school. And little did I know that I would play Cyrano someday. Right? So sometimes, that's 6 degrees of whatever it is, right? And yeah, and I think by that time I'd been acting quite a while, but Gielgud made a tremendous impression on me. When I auditioned, I was replacing Bill Hutt, and it's like a bad B movie. I was down and out in New York and staying at an artist's loft in the village. And in those days, there was no answering machine. You had somebody take messages for you, and had little cubicles. And somebody could call. You put it in your box, and you'd call up every once in a while. Any messages for Ray Reinhardt. And I limited myself to a dime because I was really down and out. At the end of the day, I would call, right, and then I say, "Oh yeah, Bob Wilder Agency call." Oh, okay. Cool. Would I come in and audition for that? Yeah, sure, of course. I came in and auditioned, and then they called back, could you come back? John Gielgud wasn't there, and he'd like to see you audition. I went back here. Of course, I got to go back and do it all over again. And I did. And Ed Heffernan, a friend of ours, was in the play, and he said, yeah, Gielgud said you're very solid indeed. So that pleased me. And then I went in, and working with Gielgud and Irene Worth was incredible. I just got to tell you one story about Irene Worth. You know it, but I played a very mean lawyer, bad guy. And Irene would be facing, her back was towards you, the audience. And I would grab her at one point and grab her arm in the back and pull it up. And just, be very nasty to her. And one day I thought I got it up too high. But you can't release it then, that looks ridiculous. Right? I kept it there. And I thought, oh my God, she must be in such extreme pain. And she would go, ah! Just like that. I said, I whispered, I said, are you all right? She said, I'm acting.
Jonathan?
Well, I guess the most influential person for me was Craig Noel. I started with my first season there, and I stayed on. At that time, they only had the Shakespeare was only during the summer, and it was a community theater in the other time of the year. And so Craig asked me to be in Neil Simon play, and I can't remember what it was. So I stayed on after the festival was over. And then I finished that, and then I thought, well, I asked Craig, I says, well, I could do props, run props or something. And that's when Craig gave me the best advice, and he says, Jonathan, you have to go somewhere else. You can't stay here, And so what happened was one of the directors of the Shakespeare invited me to another theater, and I worked there because I had worked with that director. And it just seemed to happen that I would go off. But then I found out, much to my surprise, that Craig Knoll was following me. I was up in Anchorage, Alaska, doing Man Who Came to Dinner, and there was Craig. And I thought, well, I might as well just stay there at the Globe, you know. So, but he truly championed me, and he could criticize me in the most awful way, you know. In rehearsals, he would say, "Jonathan, you can't do that. I mean, you're acting. You can't act, you know." So, but he guided me in many different ways and making choices when I had to make choices, and I owe everything to him, actually. And my greatest thing that I'm the most proud of was getting the Craig Knoll Lifetime Achievement Award. That's my most treasured award that I have.
Good. Maybe you would each talk about a production that you have been in or seen that was powerful or important or meaningful to you in some special way that still stands out to you, that when I say this, it comes to your mind?
The ones we saw or the ones we were in?
Whichever. Whichever.
Well, of course, I go back to that first thing, going to Stratford, Ontario. I'd never seen, it was a Thrust stage. And that play, it was Richard III with Alec Guinness and Irene Worth. And just this thing going at this, you were in part of this. It just astounded me that I'd never been thrilled like that, being like in a show almost. And that was one of the things that, you know, made me want to, someday maybe I'll get there. But I would go to that place a lot when I was young if I wasn't doing summer stock. I remember I saw an incredible performance of The Merchant of Venice with a wonderful Czech actor playing Shylock named Frederick Volk. And this was a Shylock. There was no acting. It was about a man's soul. I don't know how you did that. He was a soul on stage, and I just never forget. It was so tremendous. You were glued to that man. My favorite production of anything I was ever in was here at the Old Globe. The first time I got to play Lear, and that was an American director named Edward Payson Call, who Craig helped, and Guthrie helped. Ed was a stage manager at the Guthrie, and Ed Call directed a little production after a show, and remember Guthrie fell out of his seat laughing so much. The next year Ed was directing. But Ed, well, it was Ed and Craig, they picked me to do it. Remember, we started working on it a year in advance. And it was Peggy Kellner designing it. It was all based on Ivan the Terrible, that old Russian movie. That was the look of it, just immense. And the thing I remember about it most of all, we had to cancel the only preview we had because we had never finished blocking the play. So instead of performing that night, we finished doing the play and we opened up just bare, raw, doing it. And it was pretty stunning. And a dear, sweet old friend of ours there, Sandy McCallum, who played the Fool.
Yeah.
And Sandy left us a couple years ago, and I read his last interview, and the interviewer asked him, "What was your favorite thing you ever did?" And he said, "The greatest production I was ever pleased to be in, was King Lear at the Old Globe." And it was one of those magic, just magic.
Ken played the doctor in The Elephant Man on Broadway. How is doing a Broadway play you spent most of your time in regional theaters.
Yeah.
But how was doing a Broadway play different?
I was never in love with New York. I mean, I got everything I could out of it, but I felt a New York audience was coming to see actors who were a product. They wanted to see that actor do the same performance in everything. They didn't change. Even now, some old faded TV star they'll bring in to do that same performance in a show, and that's why I never cared about staying. I grabbed doing Elephant Man on the Road, which was making a lot more money than the Broadway salary, much, much more. And the thrill about playing not to a Broadway audience, that the audience came to the theater because they really wanted to come to see and hear a play. It wasn't New York where you're there on a convention or on a tour and they really wanted to come. They wanted to be there, which is all the difference in the world. And I think that's I say that Guthrie was greatly responsible for it by starting that Stratford Festival, which was the thing that goosed the whole regional theater in this country. That was 53, and by the beginning of the 60s, it was cooking all over the place because it was doing great plays that you could understand. Guthrie made sure he didn't want you putting on a phony English accent, nor did he want you to do, I had N-O-W, and I guess I was saying now. And he would say that again. It's no A in that, it's no, not now, no. And he was at me all the time for that. But he was so interested in making sure that everyone in the audience, no matter what corner they were in, that you could be understood. And I think that's a thing that's has unfortunately disappeared in the theater these days, with the microphone coming in, with people acting to their microphone rather than to one another and for an audience. A big difference. I was congratulating him. I went to the Globe 2 years ago, and Craig Knowles said, "Oh, don't go. They're all on mics. And I went to see everybody had their scars, their mics. And the only person who didn't have a scar and who I could understand every word of was him. Because he was still doing it for real, no machinery. I really wandered off but here I am.
That's why I wanted them to come, so they'd wander off. Right.
Well, actually, I'm going to wander too because
Wander.
Wander. I just want to ask you: is that why you cut all the nows in your part in the play?
And you cut all of your lift.
What productions?
Well, I'm not going to.
Okay, or say what you want to say.
Maybe later, but joining ACT was really the biggest decision in my life. And American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and Bill Ball was forming this company, and I had just finished the run on Broadway with Gielgud and Irene Worth, and I thought, I'm going to stay in New York now because I had been in regional theater. I thought, this is great. Some people have seen me in the play. I did well in it, and I thought, no, I'm going to stay in New York. And I got a call from Joe Papp in Shakespeare in the Park, and Bill Ball, same time. Two called me at the same time, and so I wanted to stay in New York. And Joe said, "I'd like you. I'd like you to play in Troilus and Cressida." I said, "Fine." I said, "But I'm 98% sure. I'll let you know on Friday." And this was Wednesday. And I thought, well, 98% sure that he wants me, And then Bill Ball called and said, I'm forming a company called ACT and I'd like you to join. And I said, well, yeah, but I have to know by Thursday. And then something that I've done ever since, I advise young people, you take the first good offer, not the best offer, good offer. I thought to myself, I called Joe, and I said, Joe, blah, 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 blah. Bill Ball is flying high. I said, well, Ray, I can't let you know until Friday. I thought, it's ridiculous. I'm 98% certain. What does that mean, 98% certain you want me on Friday? So I went with Bill Ball, and that was like almost 30 years of theater work and playing most every part I could conceive within my range. So that was a fantastic decision to make. And I'm glad I made that decision, you know. To answer the other question, Cyrano de Bergerac, I guess, playing Cyrano, that was, you know. And then going to Moscow and doing Desire Under the Elms. And which was, they had earphones, so it was translated into Russian. And they loved that because it's so heavy. Oh, Desire Under the Elms is such a heavy play right now. And opening night, they had a party afterwards, and I was playing a very heavy part. I was in my 40s at the time, but it was very demanding physically. And I said, no, I don't want to go. And I said, well, you have to go. My God, the Russians will be so insulted if you don't come. I mean, you're starring in the play, blah, blah, blah. I said, all right, for half an hour. And I talked to one of our men, Gino Barconi. I said, Gino, you got to get me home. Because they had a 12 noon matinee the next day after opening, which is insane. It's not even 2 o'clock, but 12 noon. I said, I'll get you. 4 o'clock in the morning, I was still there. And we had one translator, a woman, and we had 16 actors, and Russian actors, and it was a fantastic evening. But the Russians were so funny, you know, making all these, to our grandparents without whom we would not be here. to the ACT, the Moscow Theater. I had laryngitis. I was, you know, and I thought, oh my God, how am I going to get on at 12 noon tomorrow? And I was playing a 76-year-old guy at the time. So my first line is, how we be to hum, Abby, you know. The leading lady, I didn't have a chance to tell her I had a doctor, a Russian doctor, and he helped me a little bit. But being 76, luckily I squeaked by. But when I opened my mouth, she looked at me, oh, God, you know, what's happened? But we got through it okay. And being an old guy in the play was helpful, you know. So, yeah.
John?
I think I'd have to pick the Globe Theater when I played Iago who did I play it with?
Paul Winfield.
Paul Winfield.
Just ask me.
What's my line? It's interesting in talking about hearing. In the Elizabethan times, people didn't go to see a play. They went to hear a play. And Hamlet says, we'll hear a play tonight. No one said we're going to see a play. And it's like when you go to a concert or something, you hear a pianist, you don't go see a pianist, or we hear the opera, you know. But with Iago, we based it on a book of someone in Spokane, Washington, who was a rapist, and he had raped a serial rapist, and his father was the head of the main newspaper of Spokane, and this guy joined the search party to look for himself, and they have pictures of him in the book, and he looks like the boy next door. He looks like just a plain, ordinary person, and Jack O'Brien directed that, and he gave me the book to read. He says, I think there's a lot of Iago in this character. And it was a psychiatrist who had written a book about what a true sociopath is. What a sociopath is someone who needs to be needed and who believes his own lies when he's actually telling them. So our rehearsals where Jack would take me off to the side and not let Paul know this and say, Jonathan, Cassio is really sleeping with Desdemona. I want you to play the scene that way, that it's actually happening. You're not lying. You're really telling him the truth, and you want to help him. So I did that, and once through the rehearsal, and Paul didn't know anything, and Jack said that's the way he's got to be played. The word honest Iago, I can't tell you how many times it's said in the play. So, and I discovered so many things. Some pretty frightening things too. At the end of the play, there are three bodies on stage dead: Othello, Desdemona, and Emilia. And Iago is not dead. I was in a pool of light at the foot of the bed, and they leave, and Jack, just when it came down to just the spot on me, he says, "I want you just to give a little movement, just a little movement." He's bound up and everything. Well, I had this uncanny feeling that someone was going to kill me in the house, and my wife, who I wasn't married to her at the time, but she was there, and she had the same kind of feeling. She says it was really spooky, and when I wanted the lights to go down so I could get off the stage, and then I didn't want to take a curtain call. It was the most frightening thing I've ever been through in the theater. And then the other thing is I can't remember a thing I did. And I said, well, I know that was good. What did I do? I couldn't think of anything that I could.
I think we probably.
Yeah.
I remember Dame Sybil Thorndike, whether she was doing Oedipus with Olivier, and I don't think she thought that much of it. But one afternoon, she really said, "My God, he's doing it," and she went to she said, "I've never done this," and I went to just said, "Larry, you," and he said, "Yes," and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I can't remember a thing I did, and I think that.
I'm going to add something to that, because we've talked about it. You've heard me. So when I played Cyrano, the death scene at the end. It was a moment again. I don't know what happened, but the character, myself, and then another presence in back of me. And everything in the theater, I mean everything, the audience, the fellow actors, the brickwork, stage, were all one. It's, I don't know what it was. I just felt, I heard my voice, but I was nothing of my body. I wasn't feeling anything. And it was a fantastic experience. Transcendental or whatever you want to call it.
There's no body in it. It's out here.
Yeah,
it's out here, and it's the thing that's really amazing is that it's not only out here for me, it's out there for you too.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, and the minute you try to bring it in here,
it
doesn't work. It doesn't. I mean, you've got your technique and all that, but. That's what happened to that performance, and I've seen it. I saw Plesetskaya do The Dying Swan, the Shrine Auditorium, and it's a simple little piece. It's not 6 minutes or so. About 6 minutes, and she died. And she fluttered down and died, and then something happened to her. I can't explain what it was. It was like she'd willed her soul to go into the dressing room, and it was silent. It wasn't. There was no movement or anything. The audience, the entire audience, went right at that. She wasn't even moving. And then I remember at the intermission, nobody talked in the intermission. Maybe in the bathrooms, I'd go in the bathroom, but nobody talked. Nobody talked in the lobbies at all. I've never seen just amazing kind of thing, and I think that's the same kind of thing that happens. It has. It's like bel canto singing. They don't aim their voice in the Germans in the stomach and all that, but they aim their voice up here. It's out here. This is where they aim their voice. So it goes all up through the sinuses.
Before I risked going to New York, I finished drama school in Chicago. At that point, had the opera companies had all died and there was a new one starting, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I said, well, I used to sing in the opera. You got any jobs and all that? So I was like the bookkeeper. I filled ticket orders. I was just took notes for the directors, and I also had to take care of one of the sopranos. I had her power of attorney, and I was very proud to say I used to pay her in a bag of $1 bills. She would usually up me in. She'd be sitting there in her brown panties, and her real name was Mary Kalagoropoulos, but then she became Maria Callas. And I remember one of those, it was a dress rehearsal of Il Trovatore. And it was dragging on, and I remember getting to the last act, and she had changed into her street clothes. Remember, she had black shoes, black stockings, gray flannel skirt, black sweater, pearls. And she sang that aria. I remember she would, she knew that she was just singing. I remember she just stood there. I remember she had one foot on the prompter's box and was just singing. Well, it was something so incredibly beautiful, and she finished it. The orchestra stopped. There was absolute silence. Orchestra just sat there. And there were like 5 of us in the audience. Everybody else that came to the dress rehearsal had gone home. And she just stayed in that. It was one of those never to be experienced again. It was just amazing. Time stopped.
Yeah.
You were in the presence of some incredible thing happening. Amazing. Still remember that.
I think that's why we go to the theater.
Yeah.
My father used to say, you go for those couple of magic moments that you hope to experience that will live with you forever. Because most of it you're going to forget, and most of it's just going to go by. But those couple of moments that transcend something and take you to another place is why we keep going back and what we
Yeah.
hope for.